No, I'm a physician by training. I'm based out of New York, and that's where I practiced for many years, and I loved it. And I was primarily working in the virology space, so HIV, hepatitis, not, and then later came COVID. And I was a full-time physician and I loved life. And I started writing articles and that eventually led to a book. And I wrote a book on gay men's health and that led to a radio show on Sirius XM. And I wasn't a host, but I would come on once a month and answer questions. And it was really a lot of fun. And that led to my appearance as a HIV expert in certain documentaries, which was also really great. So I had a really great career working in as a physician, but also as an expert.
Hmm.
And something happened. I was on tour for the book and I met some folks that knew me when I was a kid. And we were growing up together in Staten Island as Boy Scouts. And I had had a very traumatic experience in Boy Scouts. And because of that recollection of it, it reminded me of that. And when anybody has ever had a trauma, you forget, you get out of it and you don't remember it every day unless it's really fresh. So I hadn't remembered what happened to me when I was 11 to 13 for a very long time. And that night I did remember. And, I don't know, this is like probably 2010.
Okay. I
So,
was going to
we
ask,
didn't,
yeah.
we didn't have Chat GPT yet. Google was working, it's still in its infancy, but I looked up the scoutmaster who had molested me and I found something really horrifying. I found out that the year after I told the Boy Scouts of America and my parents, and after my parents were shamed into keeping it a secret, he adopted a boy. He wrote a book and he was on the Today Show where and he was also Father of the Year. And so that began a very difficult period in my life where I hunted him down and I worked with the police and wore a wiretap. The reason why we did this is because he hadn't only adopted one boy, he adopted 15 and they all
Jeez.
had special needs and 3 were still living with him. And I called him, I called him a few times with the police, but I called him once on my own. And of course he didn't remember me. And I'll never forget, I was working with an amazing therapist at the time who was helping me with trauma. And she said to me, child molesters see children like a alcoholic sees a glass of wine. You're just another glass of Merlot. He doesn't know who you are. You're not a person to him, which made a
Okay.
lot of sense. It
Yeah.
hurt, but it made a lot of sense. Lo and behold, we brought him to justice. I mean, he died within a year. You have to remember, I didn't tell you this. He was not only the scoutmaster, he was a highly decorated police officer. That's what layered that all this complexity. So I don't know what killed him in that year. I'm assuming he may have been murdered. I don't know. But the point is, it ended. And like so many people, I had done all the work in therapy for years. I wrote a book about
Hmm.
my experience. It was a memoir and it got published in 13. And I felt I'm good. And I was really happy. I was also married by this time. I was successful in my work. And I had done that for many years. And so imagine 2013, now 2020, the pandemic hits. So now we're going full circle.
Yeah.
And I think what the pandemic did to all of us was it threw us in a situation we weren't prepared. And fortunately, some people had family. Some people were isolated. For me, I felt like I was detached from a lot of the pillars that were holding me together. And as a person who experienced trauma, that trauma of COVID was very unsettling. And so I reached for alcohol and I drank like millions of other people. And one of the things that's really funny is that how available was alcohol to us?
Yeah.
I mean,
It was, it was,
It's essential.
Essential. Yeah. I was looking for that word. It's
Yeah,
essential. Yeah.
they didn't close it. In fact, so, all the statistics show that the alcohol went skyrocketing, the use of it.
Yeah.
And, at the same time, I am also, one of the lead witnesses for this, lawsuit, class action suit against the Boy Scouts of America, which is 90,000 survivors. And we actually won. It was probably one of the largest settlements in the history. And again, great. I'm feeling so great about it, but something happened. And this is what my tipping point was. We were made to ask to fill out I believe it was a 47-page questionnaire about the abuse, and it had to be in very specific details. And this just, I didn't, I keep saying think because that's my mechanism of denial. I drank myself silly to the point where I don't remember filling it out. And the next morning I woke up in the basement with my computer. It was completed. I didn't remember anything. And I reread what I wrote because I wanted to make sure I did it accurately, and I did. But the idea that I filled out a survey about abuse while blackout drunk really bothered me. And I remembered I joined Reframe and I loved the whole concept of it, but I did what I call the toe in the water.
Okay.
You're just kind of joining Reframe and you do the tasks and, I'm kind of doing it because I'm in denial because I'm a doctor and I shouldn't have to do this and I should know better. And so that went on for a little while. And, again, I feel it's important for a lot of reframers to understand when we talk about rock bottom. I think it's also like, it's not a one size fits all. It doesn't have to be this calamitous disaster that happened. And fortunately for me, that didn't happen. I just think when the really turning point was, I looked in the mirror one day and I was like, who are you? And you had so much expectations for yourself. And you want so much more for your life, and you're lying to people and you're hiding your drinking and you're pretending and you're blaming it on this victimhood of being, molested and valid at a point. But I just said, I can't do this. And I remember I restarted Reframe. I didn't delete the app, but I really engaged. And I remember I started the meetings, and I think the meetings were a game changer. And by this time I had already been a coach for years as well, but it really clicked for me. I've been doing that ever since. And I have to tell you, one of the things that I was really focused on during the pandemic from the period of 20 to 22 and then beyond was, I feel such shame about what I've done. And the shame is so pervasive, and it is something that everyone talks about over and over again. I have interviewed hundreds of people who had been molested or who broke up with their husband and they didn't know anything about his secret life, or they lost their job, or it always comes back to shame. And I thought to myself, I was really focusing on books about shame, and they all sort of touch on the same thing. But again, it was, what if you could look within yourself at what the shame is really telling you instead of trying to get past it or move on, or, like, the shame doesn't go away. It just doesn't. And I'm sorry to tell you that. I wish I had something more inspirational. But what if you could turn it into something that's guiding you towards something? And I think a lot of what we do at Reframe is focused on non-judgment, recognizing, observing, mapping, all of the things. And I developed the framework called the Compass Framework. And I've been applying it for years now. And again, another part of it was, a lot of people had said to me, did you think you'd ever write a follow-up to your memoir? And I'll be honest with you, Kevin, I had no interest in writing a follow-up memoir.
Okay.
I think a memoir about child molestation is also tough. It's it's a tough read. Some people can manage. Some people are deterred by it. But you know what else, Kevin, which is really creepy, and I'll share it with you, is you get pedophiles who read it like porn. So I was very cautious about how much I described in my memoir about being molested. I didn't want to contribute to this conversation where I'm making people get off on my book. So the idea of doing that again was just too much. But I was interested in writing about the Compass framework and what led me to it. So the new book that I've written is sort of a hybrid. It's called narrative nonfiction, where you tell your story, basically what I've told you that led to this point, and then how I apply what I learned. Reframe, I keep saying that. Reframe, I know, has helped me so substantially because I think it's just based in science. It's based in this idea that there is more than just this one way of approaching sobriety or recovery or mindfully moderating. A lot of people really appreciate, and what we hear more and more is that Gen Zers, they want this non-binary attitude about what could this look like for me. And I think when people feel there's choices or they feel that they have agency, they think, oh, this isn't a moral failing on my part. I actually have a say in this and I can actually do something about it. And so that's what I like. I like that. I like working with people who see what you said in the introduction. This isn't about your glass. This is about your life. And what more do you want out of it?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's just having that non-binary approach, right? Because I've shared that. Just shared on a meeting yesterday for kind of like a speaker share type of thing. But some of what led me up to stopping drinking, which never thought, that wasn't the plan. But along the way, it was like, well, there's AA or I could just keep drinking. Those are like the only two options that I felt they were. And it's like, but AA, it was like, I saw it as abstinence, right? So it's like, well, it's not like I'm never going to drink again. I just need to cut back, right? I just need to. And so I feel like I got stuck for a lot longer without doing anything because there was only one option that I thought was there, right? And now more and more obviously now the internet and social media and all that, there's, a lot of different avenues that people can go down. But having that agency to understand and decide for yourself, like, well, can I do this? Can I try this and see how that works? If no, like, well, what about this? And, keep working at it.
Absolutely. And again, if AA works for you, good for you. Yeah. Good. Use it. I just think there's also a bit of it feels a little like sometimes it's antiquated. Like you have to do it this way. It is a stepwise thing. There is a dogma attached to it and that turns people off. Okay, great. And then like what are my other options? Well, do it on your own, willpower, just suck it up and just do it. And I think what I hear more and more is that people just appreciate evidence. They understand that, we have to pivot. It's so funny. Before we had the pandemic, you went to a place for AA. You went to some basement of a church. No shade to the church, but you went somewhere. And then when we didn't have that, everybody became a Zoom or a Teams expert. You need to constantly pivot. People are changing. And certainly you're younger than me, but like the generation after us doesn't drink like your generation, certainly doesn't want to drink like my generation or my parents or my grandparents. We're no longer living in the Mad Men world. And even though drinking was very common, and a lot of my clients who are in their 50s or 60s will tell me, there was a pitcher of martinis that my father made every afternoon. Drinking culture was a lot different. So I think attaching it to steps and some higher being works. But I think we also have to pivot more and more with the times that we are living in. And that's why I believe more and more like Reframe found their niche. They're very solid with their science. And that's certainly what drew me. And we have so many healthcare providers who are part of the Reframe community who love that piece about it. Like, okay, this I can wrap my head around. There's science. I get the dopamine. I mean,
Yeah.
I was watching, this Netflix series. I don't know. It was called Beef. I don't know if you catch the second season.
Why does that sound familiar? I'll have to look at that.
Well, the first one was amazing. I just started the second one. And the guy has an addiction. And so he listens to, I don't know if they're not podcasts. I think he listens to meditation. And all I kept hearing was, you're waiting for the dopamine burst, and it was all the neuroscience that we talk about. And I thought, how funny has this all of a sudden become like just part of our lexicon of what we talk about? Like everyone knows that this is a dopamine hit, that we're just feeding this addiction to dopamine and that we're dysregulated. And so that we can't do anything about it unless we jump off this merry-go-round and stop this loop. So that's why I felt when I first joined, I hadn't really immersed myself in it. Plus I was also in a lot of denial, like a lot of people. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't think I had a problem. And, and that's because I was looking at my history. I was like, I grew up. We had wine. My parents had wine every day. I mean, my mother still does. They drank every day. And so I didn't even drink every day, but it was something about the pandemic that just pushed me over the edge. For better or for worse, it coincided with that Boy Scout survey, which really just shook me. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to really reintroduce myself into the Reframe world. Like I could really understand what my choices were. And I think it really came down to choices, really having choices.
Choices with how you went about
Yeah.
making this change. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think once you tell me no, I get very like, no, I'm not doing that. So it was well, what do you want? The idea that you were picking, are you on the AF track or the mindful? Like it seems so foreign to me. I was like,
Yeah.
really? Some people drink, and I think sometimes what I like most, I don't know about you, I like the mixed meetings most. I like them when they're all there because it's sort of like, this is the real world. There are
Yeah.
people that drink. You have
Yeah.
to get used to it.
Yeah.
You can't be saying, oh, I have a trigger warning. I'm sorry. You can't do that. If you watch TV, they're drinking, they're smoking, all of those things. So I really feel like even now as a coach, after all this time, I still learn things every day where you're like, wow, you just blew my mind. Because I think that's one of the most important things is that there are people that are very vocal and they talk about their journey. I mean, I'm doing it here because, you're interviewing me. I don't typically talk a lot about myself. My coaching style is, I think it's important that I talk about a bit about myself. I like the idea, and I was taught this a long time ago where, the coach or the therapist or the person is sort of a mirror to the client or the person that you're talking to. Like, it's good that they see you, but it's also good when they project onto you. And I always think to myself, things are going well when my client gets mad at me once, because that means they're comfortable enough to just be like,
Yeah.
I don't like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, great. I'm not great that you're mad at me, but great that you can say you're mad at me or you didn't like something. And I think those are the breakthroughs I look for in people. And, it's a tricky thing what we do. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met some incredible coaches, but at the same time, I don't take for granted every day how tough it is.
Well, because I mean, it's so, yes,
Did I
you
just
know,
complain?
no, I don't think so. At least I didn't see it like that. We're talking about alcohol, right?
Yeah.
But we're not. I think
No.
that's the trickiest part is first, I think sometimes the trickiest part is getting people to see that, right? And to see like, well, it's not about, like we said in the beginning, it's not about alcohol, right? It's not about the contents of your glass. Yes. That is the overarching issue driving this, but it's why am I reaching for that glass? Why am I reaching for that drink? And that's, there's a million different, infinite number of reasons, across everybody. And you can't just, you have to give yourself time. You can't just solve it.
Right.
So like when you came on Reframe, you tried it. Yeah. Oh, I like this, but it sounds like it might be fizzled out a little bit.
Yeah,
I
I did.
don't know if that's the proper word that you would use, or the same word that you would use, but we hear that all the time. Like if I ask someone like, oh, how long have you been on Reframe? It's always like, well, I downloaded it, back in 22. And then that's why I love the fact that it's an app. And like you mentioned about how things changed from in person to virtual. That was one of the reasons why I went with, it was easy. I'm lazy. I always say that I'm lazy and I just need to do things as simple as possible. Otherwise it won't last. But like going to an AA meeting, first of all, walking into an AA meeting blind with nobody, like if I knew somebody, fine.
Easier.
Like if they were like, oh, hey, why don't you come with me? If they told me that, be like, sure. But going in there cold, going into having to go to a therapist's office every week or month or whatever. No, that's why I was like, I signed up for BetterHelp. I went online, virtual. I'm like, if this doesn't work out, I can just cancel. And 7 years later, I'm talking to Nikki tomorrow. So it's how can one of the reasons why I came on full time, I changed my career was because it was cut back and quit. So people had an option. People had an entry point if they were like, well, I don't want to give up drinking forever. This is an entry point to explore how it's showing up for you. And two, it's in your pocket. It goes with you.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it is an entry point because you're not going in there saying, by the way, before you come in, you have to agree never to drink again. You have to agree to, like, it's like too much. So now you're saying, listen, we have choices here. So you want to not drink. Let's just talk about what's going on with you right now. And I think that is the key. You're right. It's not so much about the alcohol, but you have to get there. You're drinking as a reason. It's the vehicle you're drinking as the vehicle to make you avoid there's something else there that you don't want to address. And yeah. I think for a lot of people, that's very hard. And, for the clients that I see with Reframe, it's always the discussions are about alcohol initially. And then all of a sudden we never talk about alcohol. Like I'll ask, I'll check in. I'll be like, how are you doing? But we're not talking about alcohol anymore. We're talking about goals. What do we want to do? What do I see myself? Or relationships with their family, their loved ones, friends. Invariably it's about something much deeper rooted. And once you get past that, you realize, and it's tough. These are tough conversations as well, because, people are really becoming vulnerable and they're talking to you about their secrets that they might not have ever vocalized to anyone. That's intense.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned too, being a doctor, being a coach, you know all of the things. Like
yeah, I know better.
Yeah, it's like you don't know all the things, but what alcohol is doing more than the average person, let's say. I'll put it that way. And it sounded like, and you can correct me here, that made it like harder for you to
worse, yeah,
address it because, well, there's shame or guilt, whichever you might rise to, but related to that, like, oh, I know what to do here, but knowing and doing are two different things. So, what would you tell somebody who's like, I can do this on my own. I'm going to keep trying to do this on my own because I know what's wrong.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something. Like there's a difference between knowing and doing. And when you're in the thick of it, it's wrong. Like I have not met one person at Reframe who thought my life was great. I don't know what happened. I just joined Reframe. Like, what's that Jelly Roll song? Nobody enters the room at a winning
Winning
streak or
streak,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, something's wrong. And so the questions you need to ask, let's say for everybody who's not part of the Reframe community that's listening to this, if you suspect something is wrong, if you are not happy, that is a big signal for you. And so I always thought when I was before Reframe, I was thinking to myself, it has to stop. This isn't good. I don't like where I am in my life. I actually started to create lists and I would say, what did I want out of my life? Where did I think I would be? And where am I? And clearly there is a misalignment. So we talk about core values a lot, especially like in my groups as well. How would you describe yourself? Okay, it's easy. I'm a guy. I'm married. I'm a physician. Easy. Top three. What are my core values? And those change every once in a while. And are they aligned? Like, do you see yourself living your core values? And if you don't, if you think this isn't good, then you probably need help. No matter if you're a doctor or an astronaut or, a teacher, it doesn't matter because addiction is one of those things that it's the equalizer. It makes us all the same. It really does. This is a neurobiological, physiological mechanism of action that happens to people. And yeah, there are people that don't have this problem. Well, there are people that don't get cancer. It's just, what can you do? And I think what's more important is to not ask yourself why I'm like this, but why I continue to be like this. Like, why don't I want better? And for me, I just had this drive to say, I want better. I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I just want to experience life to the fullest and not have it tethered to this drink, which in the end isn't serving me at all. I've never met one person who is part of the Reframe family who has gotten to a point where they were very happy with their relationship with alcohol, thought, yeah, you know what, I could go back to where I was and not be so upset. No, they all feel the same way. Once I closed that door, I felt great. I felt different.
Yeah. And cause it shows, 1.5 liters per person on average in Germany, that you threw out earlier, that's average. So obviously there are people who are going to drink less than that. Obviously there are people who are going to drink a lot more than that. But, I would say you don't have to be like, okay, I'm drinking 3 liters a day to have a problem. You could be drinking 1.5 liters. You could be drinking
Absolutely.
one drink a week, or, I'll just keep it on the low end, and still have an issue with it, right? Because it impacts you in a certain way. And I think that's the most important thing that, people don't realize, or I never thought of before. It was, I had a problem or I didn't. And it's like, no, everybody who drinks, on a long enough timeline at some point is going to have a problem with it, whether they are admitting it outright or not, because, how many times have we woken up after, even when I was in my early 20s, being like, I'm never drinking again, right?
Yeah, of course.
And, you go right back to it, but forget it. Who cares about I hate the problem. Do you think you have a problem? I'm like, I hate that question. I hate that, did you think you were an alcoholic? No, it doesn't matter. That's not a good question to ask. It's like how it wasn't impacting me well. Let's say that. And yeah.
I think you're right. Well, not that I think you're right. You are right. One of the other significant things is you brought up that's important to underscore. It's, you could drink a liter and a half and not have a problem, or you could drink a glass and it'd be a problem. I think it's all subjective. It's personalized. I like to go back to, why are you drinking? I'm depressed. I am lonely. I can't tell anybody. When folks are mindfully moderating after a period of sobriety and they want to try to incorporate alcohol into their lives, I said, okay, good. We're going to talk about this and let's see how you do it. And I recently had a client who said, I have this 2-drink maximum. And, I had a family member visiting. We were having a good time and I drank over that. And I said, yeah, you see the difference though? Typically you drank because you were alone. You drank to be secretive. And here you drank with your sister and you were having a good time. I think there's a different context there. Now, am I celebrating it? No, she went over what has been her maximum and she is not happy with herself, but she also, I think the rationale for why she chose, I always go back to what is your intention? What do you want? I mean, did you choose to drink more or did you just say to yourself when you wake up the next morning, oh, I don't know how that happened or how I got, there are different contexts where you have to look back on what choices you made that led to this. And then say to yourself, okay, where did I go? Where did I misalign myself with what my core values are? Where did I stray? And I think you're absolutely right. It's not, do you have a problem? Are you an alcoholic? Yeah, these are all labels. And that's identity. And that's identity, which is not the problem. Yeah. So that's probably where I stray a little bit from AA. I don't know about you. The idea of saying my name is Frank and I'm an alcoholic makes me want to.
Never did it, never will.
Yeah, because that's identity. It's not about the identity. You're Kevin, you're dad, you're a husband.
And I haven't had a drink in almost 7 years. I'm not going to say that I'm an
for the rest of your life. Now,
yeah. I'll be like, okay, how about this? I'm in remission, or, is that the right term? Like I'm not in recovery. I'm recovered, but I can always,
but it's a label.
Go back. Yeah, exactly.
It's the labeling. So if you attach yourself to this identity, and we all subscribe to the same identity, that to me is almost like admitting we're in a cult.
Well, and here's the one thing I will say is like, if it works for you,
absolutely.
Great. Then if it works to define yourself as that and say, hi, I'm Kevin and I'm alcoholic, so that for me personally, that I know that is who I am, that is what I have to be careful of and not do, and that is to keep me, that's do it. But I'm also the same person who says, if you don't want to do that, don't do it. Like, you don't say that. You don't have to label yourself.
Yeah. And again, I know maybe I'm hitting AA hard, but I think what I'm getting at is if you do the research and you find what works right for you, go for it. I think that's amazing. Anything that works for you is good. I don't care. I mean, there are people who don't eat meat. There are people who are keto. It's what works for you. I don't think there is mine is better than you, but I do feel that the trap for people, and we see this sometimes at Reframe, where people identify by their drinking or they identify by their behavior. And it more or less, I always train them, you're a whole person. You have multitudes, and you have shown that you have power to make changes. And so I like just bringing people and lifting them up to see what more they can achieve as opposed to, defining themselves by the number of drinks. That's where when I get a little bit detached from people is when we start talking about the number and how many. And I'm like, that's great. You can do that on your own with your own little graph and stuff. We need to talk about what is getting in the way of living the life that you want. That's the obstacle. Now that and especially, so we've moved on, right? So once you've eliminated alcohol from your life, what's stopping you now? Because those things don't go away. You still have to address them.
Yeah.
And I think now that alcohol isn't the problem for a lot of people, then you have to think beyond that. And the other thing that you brought up is there is no mindfully moderating for a lot of different programs. There is just one way, which is sobriety. And I think that's where we're running into trouble with, especially younger people. They don't want to be told, what, I got to quit drinking or not drinking. It's like, well, let's explore what the options are.
Yeah. And let's learn tools to help us either whichever way. I started doing my hand motions in 2 ways, but I'm like, no, in whatever way, you want to go because, because abstinence isn't, if that works for you, great. If you want to work towards mindfully moderating, then work towards that. And it's still the same thing that you're saying there. It's still identifying like, what are the reasons why I might reach for that drink? Yeah. Where are the disconnects in my life and things like that. And then, I think mindfully moderating, cutting back, is I think no matter what we do, it's like always kind of reevaluating and reflecting on where we're at because, I know people who, over the course of time working at Reframe or whatever, like they'll get to a point that whenever they started, let's just say the year before they started and they're like, I wish, I hope to have, be down to X number of drinks a month. I'm here now and I want to be there. And then they work towards that. And I've seen people get there and then be like, yeah, I don't want to stay here. Like this isn't what I want anymore. Right. And it's evaluating that along the way and adjusting and keeping working on yourself. How is this thing showing up? That's where it's like, you don't have to hit a certain level of number of drinks or whatever
Right.
to
Yeah, exactly.
start looking at it and be like, nope, I don't like how this is showing up anymore.
It's so funny because you said something that made me think of like patients I knew when I was in full-time practice who would give up crystal meth or alcohol and would become really entrenched into their CA and AA and like really like became part of that team, and they would go skydiving and they would do things together as an activity. Like they became solid people, but they became, they started using steroids and working out. And I was like, wait a minute. So you gave up crystal meth or you gave up alcohol and now you're like addicted to steroids. I go, don't you see? You never really figured out what was the reason for your addiction and you never really did the work. You just stopped, which is great. But don't you see how you just picked up a transfer addiction in the process? And we're not going to argue the merits of which one is better or worse for you. But that's what I did. That's what I didn't want for me. I didn't want me to say, okay, great. All you have to do is drink two, get two cups and, you're good this week. Like, I don't want to be doing all that math in my head. It was like, how do I feel? Do I wake up and think I feel good about myself? Am I making better choices? Am I showing up the way I intended? Is my marriage better? Am I really being present for my mother who is 90 and I'm her primary caretaker, which by the way, she doesn't need my help, but in case. And you know what I mean? Like I found that those little things, like I was on calls with my mother on Sunday and I understood her and listened to her. I heard my sisters. My sister went through a very prolonged battle with kidney failure and had to get a kidney transplant. And you're there for them and you feel really good about just being the person people can rely on. And I wasn't jumping out of a plane, not that I would do that anyway, but I really didn't want to be, I guess because I'd seen patients like that, I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be somebody who just swapped out alcohol for something else and said, oh, I can do this. I'm not drinking anymore, right? Like, you know what I mean? You sort of play those games.
Yeah.
And we've all done that, like where we're doing a little, like it's called smoke and mirrors. It's like, but I'm not drinking, everybody. And you're like, wait a minute. And I didn't want that. So I felt that always from the very beginning, it wasn't about the alcohol. It wasn't about the alcohol. I mean, alcohol is the problem, but what is underlying that problem that was making me, think I needed to drink?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like a lot of times people get stuck in that framework. It's interesting. Like I think Reframe is sort of one of those things where it's like a ferry. It's getting you you get on the ferry and it's taking you to another place. But some people don't get off the ferry and they stick to this identity instead of moving on and saying, okay, what else now? Now Reframe helped me. Now what? Now what do I do? What else do I need to learn about myself? And I think that's what comes from all the different various types of meetings. The meetings, for those of you who are listening, then the meetings are not all about alcohol. It's about other things that might be going on in your life. And I think that variety, like caregivers and, professionals and women and men meetings. I mean, those are where you're listening to other people's lives and the impact alcohol had, but how they overcome it and where they're at. And I think when you hear those stories, it's very inspiring. And so A client actually told me this. She does the problem with a lot of people, and she's a psychiatrist, as she says, they get on the boat, they get on the ferry, they just don't get off. And so they remain in this one state where they're identified as, I'm an alcoholic, and they stay there instead of pushing themselves beyond that.
Yeah, I agree to a point.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Well, I'd love to.
Well, no, I mean, I agree, but I think, yeah, if you're stuck, I think if you're just focused on checking a box, not, if it's not adding growth, but I think that's where, like with meetings, especially, like I'm trying to, and that's where I think even the daily tasks on Reframe, this isn't a pitch for Reframe. The daily tasks for Reframe, eventually broaden as well. And you're covering a lot of different topics that aren't specifically related to alcohol and all that. And that's, the meetings too. I think we have a lot that are sharing a lot of different tools that, again, and this is kind of where I needed to get to myself. I was talked about this yesterday about how I binged lots of Quit Lit, like all the literature, all the books that people wrote about giving up drinking and all that. And I think I hit 10, 11 months, alcohol free at the time, but I was listening to it a little bit longer than that. And I was like, I can't keep listening to these books. Like, I'm done. I'm out. And then I binged, and then I swung to a different side, and I binged about 180 hours of Stephen King books. So then I got to the point where I'm like, hey, I can't listen to any of these. Like, what else? But very all or nothing there. But because I said to myself, I'm like, am I going to have to keep doing this for the rest of my life? Like, am I going to have to keep working on this and focusing on alcohol for the rest of my life? Because I was worried about that. I was worried about always being on that ferry, as you said. And I had to kind of reframe it into, well, what am I learning? Like, what am I doing? Oh, I read I'm reading books that like self-help and all that help me cope with things in my life. Like, it's not, I can pull this apart. Like, yes, I read this and it's helped me related to my alcohol consumption or staying alcohol free. But it also helped me with this work issue I had. And it also, that's what I looked for. And so it was all, it was, and it still is about that growth. And that's what I try and bring to in like community meetings and all of our coaches do. Yeah. It's about, it's about alcohol, growth. But it's about growth.
It's so funny. Do you find like, I'm sure you have at this point where you have clients that'll say to you, when do I stop? Like, when can I stop? And I'm thinking, well, you could stop today if you'd like. But it's not really about a finish line. It's like, how do you feel? And and you said this and I wrote it down. It's like, what am I learning? And if you're still learning and growing, then isn't that the point?
Yeah.
Certainly there are clients that are like, I don't think I need to see you every week. Or there are people like, yeah, I still do the daily tasks, but I don't get on meetings every day. Sometimes, people go to meetings like more than 2-3 times. You do what you need to do. But I think that's an important inflection point is like, you said what, 11 months a year where you're like, all right, I think I got this. And I think it's natural for people to take a break or try to navigate it so that they don't feel dependent on anything. I think we all feel like we have addiction potential for everything, and that scares us. So we don't want to become addicted to Reframe or AA or whatever. Yeah. And I think it's normal to say, can I just stop for now? And I think it's an open door here. We're here and you can come back whenever you want. But I encourage you to. And, do people give up for the wrong reasons? Yeah, sometimes they do. And you understand. And they come back and you just say, yeah, it's okay. This happens. But I do think that's what, when you were reminding me, when people say to you, like, why, when can I stop? And I love your answer as well. Are you still learning anything?
Yeah. And when you say, when can I stop, you mean like going, doing Reframe, going to meetings or going to AA meetings or whatever. Yeah. Because we all just want to get to a finish line, right? And be done. We just want to check the box and be like, okay, I moved on.
Yeah, I want to graduate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have to, and I think that was part of my graduation was realizing like, okay, well, and I don't, somebody asked me, I don't know if, I think someone asked me when I was sharing, like, when did you, I can't remember how they put it, but when did you realize like that you were done? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I think that's a hard, cause I think there were points in time when I was like, okay, I can see myself doing this for a long time. Never said forever and never will,
Yeah,
just
I'm
because
not big
it
on
doesn't
that.
help me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like that.
And then like, I would say that and maybe 6 months, I was like, all right, I'm feeling good. Let's shoot for a year. And then a month later, it was like Thanksgiving and into Christmas holidays and all of that stuff. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. I'm going to drink at the end of this month was my plan and all that. And so I think I bounced around a lot and I just keep going.
Do you
Yeah.
do that where you check in with yourself? Like, where am I? What am I thinking? Like, is anything or you just like, this is me now?
I mean, one of my guardrails that I said, one of the things that keeps me on track is my therapist, which I alluded to meeting her tomorrow and almost weekly for 7 years. Like not necessarily weekly, and early on I was just paying BetterHelp rates and all that. And then eventually she went on her own. So now it's like, I'm going through insurance, which I'm lucky, I'm very lucky that I was
Lucky.
able to do that, right? Both then and now. And if it wasn't taking insurance and I was paying full price and all that, then I would, maybe have to adjust. I would adjust the frequency, but I would still meet with her, at
So
least
maybe.
monthly. And, I kind of view it as not a therapist, but a coach now,
Yeah,
a coach
exactly.
and therapist when I need it, because that's the thing. It's like, I don't talk to her. Like if I stop talking to her, like 3 years in or 2 years in,
Mhm.
like I got a little antsy when she was like, do you feel like we still need to meet? Or when she threw that question out occasionally. Now it's like, no, I don't think we do, but it
But I
helps.
want to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but I
it
want
helps.
to.
And so, it helps me with not, don't even talk about alcohol anymore. Um,
I would imagine, yeah. Why would you at this
yeah,
point? But that is the natural progression of coaching and therapy is that at a certain point it becomes conversational where you're just checking in, you're just being present. And it does hold a lot of significance. Don't underestimate it. I have a medical mentor. I am very lucky. He's like my best friend. I've known him since I started residency training. He was there day one. I love him to death. And I speak to him probably every day. And if we're not talking about problem, and he's so gifted that I could be talking about, my sister or whatever. I'm picking on my sister today, but he'll say to me, you see how that's bringing you back to your childhood because she treats you like her younger brother, even though you're a grown man. And he'll do it in a subtle way where I'm like, wow, I just, I called him to just be talking about this new show I'm watching on Netflix, and here we are. I'm getting a little bit of therapy. So that's what I need. If you have a therapist or a coach where you can bounce things off, you don't even realize it's on a conscious level that you're actually reaching out to talk about stuff that's important because it's top of mind. I mean, it happens. So I'm not surprised you're still committed to it. And that. The funny thing is you just said, no, I don't have to do this, but I want
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
I
She
don't know
definitely,
what I would do if I'm so fatalistic. I'm like, what am I going to do if he dropped dead? I have to go get a coach and a therapist. I'd have to pay somebody.
yeah,
But it happens. I mean, I think about that all the time because, the other thing about coaching and therapy is they know so much about you. I mean, there's a shorthand now. I mean, so you can just show up and be like, I'm going to tell you something. And like, I already know what you're going to, I
yeah,
already know where this is going. I've been down this road. And sometimes you just need that. You need to be redirected or reframed. One of the think that's one of the great things about being a reframer and then a coach. as opposed to just being a coach is that I got exposed to a lot of people's styles, and the styles of different coaches and physicians that I've worked with have informed me as a person. And I think I talked about this on one of the earlier episodes where I realize now, like, I'm not so eager to jump on or pile on. I'll be like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let's think about this from someone else's perspective. Let's think about it, the counterpoint to this. And that wasn't me. I mean, that was not Frank's. Frank's really be like, yeah, get him. You know, now I'm like, wait a minute, guys, let's think about this. Maybe they were thinking of it in this way, you know,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, I'm not always right, but it is a good practice, at least for me, when I'm faced with situations I don't want to be in,
Hmm.
to think, okay, what's actually the opposite of this situation right now? And it's helped me immensely at work, specifically with bosses who are like having a bad day. And you're like, wait a minute, wait a minute. This is not about me. Maybe there's something going on.
Yeah.
I think of it that way as opposed to, and I learned that a lot from my mentor. You know, he just helped me immensely, and he did it all the while. He does it all the while without being judgmental ever, which I think is key. Key. It's key. I was telling you about beef, and now all of a sudden, I'm like, how does that?
Yeah. Yeah. Those keywords. It's like, wait a minute. That's like the antenna goes up.
I'm being therapized.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but that's so true. Yeah. And because I read so much, I
Yeah,
don't have
you
it
do.
all at hand. And I'm like trying to remember something that I just read yesterday that was just on that point about like, basically it's not about you, right? It's not about you.
I think there's a book called "It's Not About You," right?
Probably. But like that's like that was the quote I was thinking of. That was the essential, or the essential point was, we're all kind of living in our own movie.
Yeah.
Everyone else is just supporting actors, actresses, extras, all of that, and we're the same in theirs. I'm an extra in someone else's.
You're
and
an extra in somebody
actor,
else's movie.
So
my two analogies just like that, I'm probably stealing this from one of the books you read, is you've let alcohol play the starring role in your movie. Now it's time to become the star of your movie again. But you are absolutely right. You are literally you're a supporting character in everyone else's movie. And once you accept that, you'll feel a lot better because you don't have to take everything so personally.
yeah.
Like, it's really not about you all the time.
Yeah.
Freud was right. Sometimes it's just a tree, it's not a penis.
Yeah. And even in like my wife and daughter downstairs right now, like even theirs, like, I'm a supporting actor, but I don't know, my daughter just got home a little bit ago and like, I don't know what's going on in her movie today. That if I go down and just throw something in and she reacts in a certain way. Yeah. Like that's not because, well, it might be because of what I said, but
might be.
I'm not saying I'm flawless here, but so before we wrap up, I want to ask one quick question. I know. Sure. If you had any thoughts, I'm like, I wrote this down earlier. I was like, what's one way someone listening could start working with shame instead of against it?
Yeah. Well,
feel free to reword that.
No. I totally got what you mean. If you are experiencing shame, certainly if you are still struggling with traumatic childhoods and revisit it during the pandemic and still find yourself unsure of how to navigate this, please, by all means, if you can and have it afforded to you, get therapy or talk to someone. If you are reaching for substances to mask that, realize that that's never going to be the answer. And certainly working with somebody might be very helpful to you at least once to just reach out. And I think the most important thing that I ever learned was that the shame you experience or the shame I experience and still experience was not something I deserved. No one really deserves to feel shame. Nobody's life has been improved because they were shamed. Never. It's one of those things that I can live by. So you have to first accept the fact that something happened. You had nothing to do with it. You are certainly not to blame, and you certainly don't deserve to feel shame. So if you can start there, that might be a good place to start.
And what if that shame is coming from myself?
Well, it does
Same
come
thing
from yourself as
applies,
well.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing.
Well,
Okay.
you're telling yourself. See, the
Yeah.
difference between guilt is and shame is guilt is I did something and I feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Shame is I feel like I'm unworthy.
Yeah. I
You
am
didn't do
bad.
anything. I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. There's humiliation, there's shame, there's embarrassment, and then there's guilt. The one that doesn't really follow an activity or something is shame. Shame is just, I'm a bad person and I'm
Pervasive.
unworthy or I don't deserve this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do deserve happiness, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We can move on to wrapping this up. And what did you learn this week?
Is this my nugget?
This could be completely off topic, not sobriety related, just a little nugget maybe that you learned this week for listeners.
I learned something very important today. Not today, but this year. And Kevin, it is my birthday tomorrow. So
happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, he sang a little bit. So for many years, I don't know why I avoided my birthday. I despised getting older. I don't like looking back. I just hated the whole idea of it, celebrating it and feeling like, I was getting old. And I don't know why I did this to myself, but what seems so counterintuitive to me as a person and as a coach is that I preach that the most bravest thing you can do is to look yourself in the mirror every morning and say, today is going to be a great day, which I still think is important to do. So why wouldn't I apply that logic to my birthday? Well, I've changed all that. And I'm not even having a big birthday. This is what's so crazy. It's just another birthday. So I am no longer going to pretend it's not my birthday. I am no longer going to pretend that I'm getting older. I'm going to now embrace this trip around the sun, which I kind of think is fun. And so tomorrow, because it is my birthday, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to say, today is going to be a great year. You're working very hard. This is tough, but I am really proud of you. And we talk a lot about science at Reframe, which I think is really great. Of course, I love the neuroscience. And when we think about all the studies about self-compassion, about the affirmations, they work. I mean, it's irrefutable. So why not apply that not only every day, but especially on your birthday? So that's my nugget.